How has Edward Jones changed my life is really a good question. When I came to Edward Jones, it was a stopgap. It was a place I was going to land for a few years until I found something better. I really wanted to be in business for myself. I had been a small business owner for 16 years prior to coming to Edward Jones. At various times I'd had as many as 32 people working in my company. And being a small business owner, I think, is very exciting in a lot of ways. It can also be very challenging. But as I spent time with Edward Jones, there were periods of time where I got bored and wanted to leave. Not because I was upset with anybody, I was just to the point where I was ready to do something else. And Scott, I put together a group that I would call an accountability group several years ago. And we still meet, I'm going to tell you, I think monthly on a Thursday morning. And a couple of different times that I've wanted to leave Edward Jones, I sat down and shared that with that group. And unbeknownst to me, my wife had shared my desire with that group ahead of time and explained the reasons why in her mind there was no way in the world she was going to let me do it. She wanted somebody that could talk some sense into me to sit down and do it too. So I'd sit down with that group 2 or 3 times, well, a couple of times, about leaving Edward Jones and going and doing something else, only to find that they sat me down and asked me a lot of hard questions. And when we got done, it was pretty clear that there was no reason to do that.
I mean, the freedom, the flexibility, opportunity to really provide well for my family. It really has changed my life. I mean, it has truly been an absolute blessing. And it's something I don't take for granted.
This has definitely changed my life in a number of ways. Most recently, my wife and I actually had an opportunity to go on a short-term mission trip with church to Thailand and Cambodia is where we went. We went to there's 2 orphanages there that we work with through Asia's Hope, our church does. And had the opportunity to spend 10 days, 3 days in each country and then travel, but 10 days away from the office. And both financially and time off, this wouldn't have been possible if I didn't work for the company that I work for. The trip completely changed my life and the way I see things, and I think my wife would say the same thing. So, you know, along with all of the other things, the free time, the vacations that my wife and I get to go on, we're celebrating our 2nd anniversary at the end of July in Sicily, of all places, which is kind of cool. You know, and just the friends that I have. Best man works for Edward Jones in my wedding. It's just completely changed my life.
Edward Jones has not only impacted my life, it's impacted my family's life. They have seen the world. They have experienced different cultures. They have seen the culture of Edward Jones, and it has impacted their lives. For my son-in-laws that married my daughters, forgive me. But my daughters love to give, and they learned that through Edward Jones. They experienced the culture. They lived it. So I could talk for hours and tell story after story after story of them witnessing Edward Jones families giving and taking care of other people and changing people's lives.
I think we all want something that we can hang on to, you know, really meaningful stuff that we can hang on to. You know, you can talk family, tradition, college, whatever, service, you know, something that kind of ties you into something that you wanted to belong to, that you felt really good about. And I think it's that, you know, we're talking about culture here, but I think you can put culture in with tradition. I think it's one of those things that no matter who you meet that has worked for Jones, is working for Jones, I have a Jones account or something like that, it really ties you in. And from my start, it's been consistent about how we do business. And obviously it's changed my life because of all the things we could do, the opportunities we've had, the ways that we get paid, with partnership, with trips, with bonuses and things like that, that you can have your own profit center. I think it's really been, it's changed my life. We've seen, Nancy and I have seen, and our kids have seen the opportunity to go to other countries, to go to all over the United States. I think that, you know, we're kind of used to being in these parts of the world, and not too many families get the opportunities that we get. So I think that that's a real benefit. So it's really changed our life that way. Plus all the new people I've got to meet over the years, the different families that have come on with Jones and struggled like we did. So there's a real common bond there about how you get started with Edward Jones, and I think it's been good for probably 99% of us. We're gonna, you know, I'm sure there's some disgruntled people, but it's changed my life in a very positive way, and really given me a lot of independence. So I don't have to. I can follow my own course. I can follow my own thought process, and this firm has given me that ability to do that.
I met an individual called Kurt Reed. Kurt Reed was the #1 producer in the firm. Now, I didn't know that at the time. And Kurt Reed and his wife stayed up with Tammy and I until 3 o'clock in the morning, sitting by the pool in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And he told us story after story after story. And that was the end. That night changed my life. And I had no idea Kurt Reed was the #1 producer. And I looked at my wife and I said, honey, we are going to make it. I went back. I had back-to-back best months in a row, 3 months in a row. And that continued to be a trend. You go on a diversification trip. You have super vets who meet you, take care of you. I could name other vets on that trip who took us out to eat, paid for our meals, which began that culture. You always take care of the rookies. You always pay for rookies, and to this day, when I go on diversification trips, you find first-time people and you pay for their meals because you know they're using credit cards.
It was a point when I was fairly new that things were not going well. And I was struggling, and I was really almost miserable. And I remember a meeting with Bill Clark, and he invited me and Kelly to this pizza place in Middlebury. I don't remember the name of it.
Village Inn?
It's almost across the street from Essen House. Rules, yes. It was a pizza buffet, and literally I was crying. And here it is, Bill, Carrie, Kelly, my wife, and myself. And I'm telling Bill, I don't know if I can do this. And Bill, yes, you can. Of course you can do it. And you're going to keep doing this. And you're just going to go through this phase, but then things will pick up. And because I not only admire Bill, but I also trust him, I stay with it. And I'm so glad that night I had somebody that I could cry comfortable with. And that Bill didn't just took the easy way saying, yeah, this probably is not good for you. He told me, yeah, this is good for you and you can do it. And here I am now, 7 years later, having a decent business.
A couple years ago, the Baders and Bontraggers were on a joint div trip out to Maui, and we got educated on some of the customs of a beautiful 5-star resort that they have on div trips. And what was it that we learned, John?
That really was the day that we were closest to either throwing in the towel or being thrown out of Jones, I would say.
Correct.
Evidently, there is a state statute that says you can't barbecue on the front yard of a 5-star hotel in Maui. It was 4th of July. Everyone cooks out on 4th of July. The Bader and Bontraggers cooked out on 4th of July. Until the man in the golf cart came and said we were in violation of some Hawaiian state statute and we were going to have to leave.
And we ended up, out of the kindness of our hearts, going with True Jones' passion and donating the grill to a couple of surfers.
Who were homeless at the time, living on the beach. The good news was by the time that they were able to end our barbecue, the burgers were done and we were able to eat. So
Right.
all in well.
And I think you selling them for $5 a piece as opposed to the $7 that they were selling them at the resort, that might have bothered them a little bit too.
I'm probably like most advisors with Edward Jones. We could create a list of people that we'd want to say thank you to, and I think we do from time to time say thank you. But probably one in particular, and that's the advisor that really helped me get started, and that was Jim Hipschman. I mean, it was just such an absolute blessing to be able to start in Jim's office. Jim is somebody that leads by example, and to just watch the way he runs his business, the way he treats his clients, the way he approaches each and every day, that was an invaluable experience for me. And he's just a great guy.
There's tons of people that we could all say thank you to. I'm going to point out one today, which is John Beck. And John, I just want to say thanks for being an exceptionally good role model. Obviously, John runs a great business. We all know that. But John is also balanced in life. He's a man of integrity. He has a strong faith. And to have all those things, I think, is pretty rare. So John, just want to say thank you for being a good role model. I know I look up to you. I know a lot of other guys do as well. And you set the bar high. So thank you for that.
I think there's many people that I'd like to say thanks to, and I think a lot of those individuals know who they are. I'd definitely like to thank Jim Hipschman. When I look back on Jim Hipschman taking me under his wing, I did not know Jim prior to coming to Edward Jones, and I never knew what Jim had done for me until I had moved out of his office after completing a good night. But looking back on Jim today, what I really value about him is not what he's taught me about the business, but just the life lessons that Jim has taught me. How to become a better person, how to become a better family man, and those are things that I really cherish about Jim. 5 years later, I'm still welcome in his office. I still hold some client appointments over there, and he does it just to be a very good, gracious person.
Yeah, Steve recruited me, and if he would have told me the whole picture, I don't know if I would have done it. And I'm glad he didn't. He told me just enough to show me the opportunities, but
Sure.
didn't so much mention the hard part, which has been really good for me, though. So, yeah.
And look at you now, level 6,
Yeah.
grossing a
Six.
whole lot of money. That's awesome.
Yeah, although don't forget a Jones dollar is not a real dollar.
I probably ought to say thanks to Tim Stonger for recruiting me to Edward Jones. I got home from work one day and was a little frustrated with my job at the time, and remember calling him, and I believe he was in Paulsville, Washington at the time, and he started recruiting me, and I don't even think I knew he was recruiting me at the time. And next thing I know, there's a hiring kit. Somebody from the Gallup organization asked me a bunch of strange questions, and I'm on a plane to St. Louis to interview with John Baroda, and hired me on the spot. So thank you, Tim. It's been a wonderful time, and really enjoyed this.
When I think about Edward Jones and the culture, that truly is probably one of the things I appreciate most about the firm. I mean, it's something that, I truly look at this job as a gift. It's something I don't take for granted. I really give thanks for this opportunity. I won't say every day, but I think about it on a weekly basis, how fortunate I am to be able to work for a company like this. And it's not just the fact that I love what I do, because I do, but it's the fact of also the people that I work with. This region, I think, is so special. I mean, it's made up of men and women that you just enjoy being around. You enjoy sharing ideas, you enjoy laughing, you enjoy, if you're going through hard times, there's people in the region that are there to help you. We think we all have each other's back.
Well, I have a story that I would like to share regarding the culture of Edward Jones. This has been several years ago, but I was probably having one of the worst days of my Edward Jones career, and I had called my wife about noon that day to explain my struggles, and later that afternoon John Bader shows up at my office, and John came in, and you have to understand, John's office is probably 40 to 45 minutes away from mine, but John got wind of my struggles that day, dropped what he was doing, drove 40 to 45 minutes to my office, showed up with 2 giant sundaes from Dairy Queen, and we proceeded to eat those sundaes and just talked. And the funny thing was, John never asked if I was having a bad day or what was going on. He showed up, we ate ice cream, we talked, and he left. And that meant the world to me, just him showing that he cared, and without saying the words, basically telling me that things were going to be okay. So I really appreciated that from John Bader.
I would say several years back when our youngest daughter, Madison, went from being very sick to critically sick, was in constant contact with a few of the people in the region, and she was transported approximately at midnight to Memorial Hospital to the intensive care unit. And as the ambulance pulled up, Jim and Robin Hipschman and John Bader were there waiting for us. And through the course of the night and over the next couple days, the support that we had from so many people at Edward Jones with phone calls, text messages, visits, and then afterwards, people checking in on my daughter and visiting her at the house. I think that's when I first truly experienced the culture of Edward Jones and what it meant to be involved with such wonderful people.
You know, Bill, I was just thinking about this yesterday, and really when I look back over my 17 years at Jones, in almost every major life event that I've had in those 17 years, there's been Jones FAs involved in it. And I thought back to the birth of Francis when Herbster was able to get his phone call put into the delivery room saying that he was Sandra's doctor, to Mikey's illnesses where, without the support of the many Jones FAs who were willing to, help me out at work, to the home office, to the guys that came down and visited Michaelina and really emotionally got Sandra and I through that whole process, to my own surgeries with Schwartz and Nuremberg carting my butt back and forth to Mayo Clinic for my appointments, even to the passing of my dad a couple years ago, the number of people that showed up, all the way to 25th anniversary for Sandra and I this past weekend, when again we were surrounded by Jones FA. So it just really shows that the vast majority of my friends and close relationships are all with Edward Jones employees, and that's because they've meant so much to me and to Sandra and my girls throughout my 17 years here.
It's just every day. The culture is every day, and just the home office, the support they give us. If I call, there's going to be an answer to my question. If Sandy calls, there's going to be an answer. We're going to know the right answer, and it's very comforting because there's a lot of complicated things going on in the world. Just the camaraderie. I had breakfast this morning with Meredith Libby at Protective, and John Beck, and Scott Puckett, Rick Reagan, Kathy Gruzzi, Tom Lynn. Just the camaraderie around the table is just so enjoyable. Everybody's very supportive of each other. We had some ideas we exchanged with each other, and that's just so it's just so supportive. And then Pablo and I took a potential recruit to lunch yesterday, and Pablo said something to the recruit that was really accurate and affirming, and that is at Edward Jones, we've never been asked to do something that we didn't think was totally okay. There's never been something in our region or something another FA said or something home office said, we want you to do this with your clients and it serves us better than them. That just never happens. And so Pablo just very clearly stated this, we aren't ever asked to do something out of line, and that's just the culture. And I think that's set from the very top.
Absolutely.
And that's been there. It's just going back to what Pablo said, it's just a great combination of not ever being asked to compromise, of really being able to help people. And I think early on, when I first started, I can remember everyone saying, and Steve especially saying, we're really helping people. That's what we're doing, we're helping people. And I used to think, I'm not really helping people, they need to help me to get where I need to be. Because I need to make enough money to, make the payments. And I think early on, it does seem like people need us more than we need them. But now, you can just see how much we are helping people, and how you look back over 5 and 8 and 10 and 13 years of people you've been working with, and things you've helped them decide that have made huge, significant differences in their life. And so I just think it is a culture of, I mean, I can really say that's what we do. We really help and coach people, and that is really what we do.
At other places, it's like, do what's right for the organization. At Edward Jones, it's do what's right for your client. And I love that.
Awesome.
Because if I do enough things right for people, it will all happen right for me.
Right.
It'll all be fine.
Correct.
I was talking with Lee Tice about doing a seminar for Kiwanis, at which time I was, what do they call it when you're not the president yet, but you're going to be the president?
President-elect.
I was president-elect. And we had probably 65 or 70 people in our Kiwanis group that attended. And I wanted to bring Ted Jones, or I wanted to bring Lee Tice up to do a presentation. And Lee said, Jim, why don't you call Ted Jones? And I said, Ted? He doesn't come out and do these things. Lee says, Jim, why don't you give him a call and just ask him? And so I made a phone call. Here's the president, or the managing general partner of our company. I don't know how many thousand people worked for Edward Jones at that point in time. But I called and I said, hi, this is Jim Hipschman. I want to talk to Ted Jones. And she said, well, just a minute, I'll see if he's available. And I'll be darned if he wasn't on the line within 10 seconds, which surprised the living daylights out of me. I almost didn't know what to say. But I went ahead and extended the invitation to Ted Jones to come and do a presentation for our Kiwanis group. And I had 3 different dates, and he told me that he couldn't make the first date, but he could make the second date. And so Ted came out, and we actually had an overflow crowd at the restaurant for that event. And Ted simply came out and did the ICA story. And I mean, it was absolutely a knockout.
Jones has a really unique culture where we're all running our own separate businesses, but we're not at each other's throats. And I look at Edward Jones as these are some of my closest friends, my best friends, people I would go to if I was in a time of need. Recently, my dad had some health issues, turned out not to be anything major, thankfully, but the number of FAs that reached out to me and asked if there's anything they could do to help. I was out of town at the time when he had the health issues. They said, can we come and get you? Do you need help with anything at the business? Just the outreach was tremendous. Again, thankfully it turned out not to be anything major, thankfully, but the outreach was great.
There's just so many of them. I think you look at the leadership that we've had, and each time we have new leadership come in, we don't skip a beat. So when Tyler took over for Steve, and when Tom has now taken over for Tyler, I think the strength of our culture is we can have a brand new person fill the head role, and nothing really changes. And I think that's just from top to bottom, people caring about each other. It's not one person up at the top making this thing go. It's all the relationships in between. And you look back to when you're first starting out, and the ups and downs that all new FAs have. And I think we do a very good job of, and I know I did, just on a bad day, you'd get that phone call from somebody just saying, hey, how you doing? And that's a big part of it. In this region, it does kind of become like a, I don't know, family, but definitely you get some of your best friends within the region, and the families that you get to know, and your kids and your wife. And, everybody kind of ends up all on the same page, and that just makes it fun. And the longer I'm in the business, the more and more I appreciate that. Where in the beginning you kind of go into a summer regional with a little bit of apprehension and maybe anxiety, and now it's kind of like going to a party where you get to see all your friends. So it just gets better and better, I think, as time goes on, and that's a blast.
I remember a time when I was called to active duty and I was gone. And Rocio even mentioned this one year. She said she was sitting at home and got a phone call, and on the other end of the line was Jim Weddle. And at that point, Jim was not managing partner, but had been working in the department as supervisor with me, and called up and asked how she was doing and the kids were doing, and then said, "Hey, do you have a minute to come by?" And actually, I believe by this time, Jim may have actually picked up managing partner at this point in time. And she called him and just asked, or he called her and just asked, you got a minute to stop by the office? And at that point, she drives in, goes in, and Jim's out there with the kids, takes a bunch of time talking to him and stuff, and decides to give box seats tickets to her to take the kids to a Cardinals baseball out of the blue. Just a typical call, and that would be things that would happen on that.
The first way that I experienced the Edward Jones culture was when I had open heart surgery 15 years ago. That it was a shock and a surprise, but I had to have the surgery, and it's like having a near-death experience. The cultural experience was that coming to my rescue, Edward Jones flew in somebody to take care of my office for a good 6 weeks, and until I had full recovery, and then the person even stayed on for an extra couple of weeks. In the meantime, the whole region resourcefully got together and helped out my family in many different ways, and people would call if they needed, if I needed help with the office or something like that. So that really was a incredible support and a real good taste of what the culture of Jones is all about.
The greatest example is Ted Jones. This company does not exist for itself. It exists for others. The greatest advice I can give to everyone is what Ted said as an example. We are about serving other people. It's about putting others ahead of ourselves. The greatest way to succeed in this business is by not focusing on what you make. It's by focusing on taking care of your clients' needs. Ted told us that our job was to leave our communities in better shape than when we entered them. He told us our job was to change people's lives. That is so far beyond buying a stock, buying a bond, buying a mutual fund, building a portfolio, helping them establish a estate plan. It is becoming a part of their lives. And many of you in the room would say, we're almost like a son, a daughter, a parent. The role that we play in people's lives, we can't explain.
Yeah, it's amazing. One time I was even being recruited by Merrill Lynch, and I asked my regional leader about it, and he said, go on the interview, see what's up with them. And when I started telling them about Edward Jones, and they started saying that once a week they'll have mass, one of these big conference calls so that you can hear from our analysts, and I said to them, if I want to call one of our analysts, I can call him right up. And and they told me about these trips that were basically 2-day trips that you could go on, but you couldn't take your wife, but they're more or less like our due diligence trips, but they were really pumping those up. And I said, I get to take my family on some really cool trips 2 times a year. And, everything that they would say to me, I could just come back to them in a really nice way. And by the end of the conversation, they didn't really know what to say. And it's just amazing. When I started, we did not get an office for 6 months. We had to have 1,500 prospects and so many accounts open. So I had over 100 accounts open, and finally got my office. And I don't know why I thought of it, but I thought I'm just gonna, at the time John Bachman was our managing partner, I thought, well, I'm gonna send him an email, and of course back then it was a wire. I'm gonna send him a wire and invite him to my open house that I had scheduled. And it wasn't even a week later I got a wire back, and it was his secretary, and she said, well, We think John can make that if you could change the date to a certain date, which was just a few days later. Absolutely. So anyway, here I've been with the firm about 6 months, and I'm driving to the Warsaw airport in the morning to pick up the head of our company. And here came a Learjet in, and it was John Bachman and Steve Novick, our kind of like our CFO. And they spent the whole day in my office shaking hands with people. It was just incredible. And they didn't, John never said to one person, I'm the head of this company. He just said, I'm representing our home office in St. Louis. And it was just incredible. Literally, he was there until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So,
what would you say to those younger guys in the region as we try to, those guys have been out 15, 25, 35 years, have created our current culture. What about these younger guys that are going to have to propel that culture, maintain it, even improve it? What do they need to do in order to do that?
well, there's not going to be any more people that can say, I knew Ted Jones, and at some point, not even John Bachman, and so, we don't want that culture to ever be diluted just because those figureheads aren't here anymore. And so I think, all of the senior people in this region really are doing a great job, and I just think it's amazing how really there's not anybody that they will allow to fail. And that just brings that culture in. I mean, even if you are from another firm, you've read emails and sug wires about people from other firms saying this is amazing. We're not competing with each other. We help each other, and and there's just people in our region that are incredible. How much time they spend, really modeling our character to the newer people, and I truly believe in turn those newer people, as they mature with the firm, they're going to model it also, and so that's really the key. Is just the experienced people, even though, we may not have known Ted Jones or this person or that person, we still, though, the culture's been given to us, and it's our job to pass it on.